I like to put some thread on my hook shank before I put weighted wire on it. So this is Eric Leiser's Black Angus. It is named for Angus Cameron of Alfred A. Knopf Publishing, Eric Leiser's publisher. And Eric created this fly as a special request to Angus Cameron. A combination of a woolly bugger, a muddler, and a leech for Mr. Cameron to fish in Alaska. So I am winding some weighted wire onto this hook because it's supposed to be a bottom fly, starting about 1/4 of an inch behind the eye, wrapping down to a little over halfway down the shank, and then back up. It's a lot of wrapping on this fly. I am keeping the shank at the front of the hook behind the eye bare because it'll be easier to spin some deer on that bare shank. I have a pretty healthy length of black floss that I'm going to use to cover the body, get that tapered end on the or tapered body over that weighted wire, and create a base so that you can't see either the hook shank or the wire through the body material. I have the recipe for this fly in 2 different books. It's in Mike Valla's The Founding Flies, where Eric Leiser is featured as one of the founding tyers in American fly tying history and culture. I also have Eric Leiser's book, the Book of Fly Patterns, where he has detailed instructions on tying this fly. So between the 2 of those, I ought to have a fairly good idea of how this fly is supposed to be tied and what it's supposed to look like. And just get that floss wrapped in to cover up that wire. And I'm not really worried about a smooth body or anything like that. I'm just using it to create the taper off of that wire and to hide the wire and to hide the hook shank. And I'll just bring that back here to the tail end of my hook, wrap up over that floss to catch it in, even wrap under and back over it, and then I'll cut out the extra floss. The tail on this fly is 4 rooster hackle feathers, and I have them 2 on each side and they're flared away from each other. I've also given these a good crew cut. The length of the feather is about the length of the hook. So I will tie the first 2 in on the far side of the hook. I'll start with them just a little bit over the top of the hook. That way, as I wrap down on those cut rakuses, that'll stay in place. And then I'll take 2 more that I have stacked together, and these I will tie in on the front side of the shank. If I hold them under a little bit, then as I pull up with my thread, that'll get them in the right place. So thus far, the body and the tail. The underbody and the tail. The body is black marabou, and it is tied in wet hackle fashion. So I need to find the tip of this marabou feather, and it helps to have a feather that is flexible. I'll find that tip, wet my fingers, and pull back. Oh, then I broke the tip. That's all right. It's still there. Find a new tip here. Wet my fingers. Wet marabou seems to behave better. There. So find the tip of the feather, separate the tip out from the rest of the feather, and tie that in. Just wrap up over it. I want to get my thread up out of the way a little ways. I'm only going to use 3 marabou feathers for the body, and so by putting my thread about 1/3 of the way up the body from where I've tied in, then I kind of have an idea of how far I have to get this feather to go. I'll wet my fingers again, and then I'm going to pull back on the marabou barbs and wrap it just like I would wrap a soft hackle. Pulling back on everything so that it will lean back out of the way. And it's kind of a mess, but it does create a pretty fascinating fly. And Angus Cameron said he had great success with it with a rainbow trout in Alaska. What do they say? Big flies, big fish? Although that is not always the case. Here in Missouri, you want big fish. In Lake Taneycomo, you fish midges and little ones like size 20 or 22 or 24, because that's what's in Lake Taneycomo and that's what the trout eat there. Tailwaters of a dam fish very differently than other places. My stem is getting very stiff now, so I'm pretty much at the end of its wrap. And try to separate a place here where I can tie it off. Wrap up over that 3 times. Actually, I'm going to end up wrapping it more than 3 because I'm going to just tie it in without bending it back. So I'm going to just pull off the barbs on that racus and tie up over it and cut it out. It is a very stiff end on that particular marabou feather. Got 2 more. So again, find the tip. Just lay that tip, separate the barbs away from the tip, wrap up over that tip, cut out the waist, wet my fingers, and pull back on the barbs and wrap it. It is kind of a tedious fly, but a lot of these big streamers are. just more because of the size of the hook, that it just takes a lot of material to get the hook covered, and then with the long barbs on the marabou to get them to behave properly and pull back so that they create that flowing skirt and not jam my thumb on the point of the hook. Yep, got some blood. All right. I'll wrap up over that rachis. Sometimes I call it a stem. Most of the time I call it a stem. And I'm getting blood all over the place, so I'm going to take a break and go clean up my thumb. Eric did add color to his later flies, but I don't think he did it with blood. Okay, we got room for one more. Find the tip, tie that tip in, bring my thread up, cut out the ends. Yeah, it doesn't work to wet my fingers as well with the Band-Aid on my thumb. And maybe that'll work just as well. And I want to make sure that I'm leaving that clear hook up in front. And I'm going to call that good right there. Bring my thread up between here. And I think I've got some static going here too. See if I can bend that back a little bit, because I don't want to lay it down on that bare shank. Wrap up under that. Just clip out that stem without cutting my thread. I'm going to take some of the marabou with it. Okay. As with a muddler, the head is spun deer, and it's black spun, and this happens to be bucktail. I'm taking it right down from where it connects to the body so that it's a little more flourish, but I want to do a collar too, so I have the points that I've stacked, and let's see if I can get this to spin. So easy wrap, and then tighten it down and spin it. And then I'll bring my thread back up to the front, push back on that a little bit. The second clump I don't need to stack because I'm going to clip both ends. So I just grab a clump of hair and then I fan it, and I can pull out all the under stuff, under junk. And this may be even too much. And it's probably a little bit big of a clump. I'll take a little bit out of there. And I'll clip the other ends, or the tips off of that. Set that on the hook. Do a loose wrap over the top, another loose wrap, and then cinch and spin it. And then I'm going to use what I call patty packer. It's a hair packer that I made, and just push back on that a little bit to get some room with that. I bring my thread out, and then this is also designed as a half hitch tool, so I can throw a half hitch. I'm going to throw a few single half hitches on there first, just to get that hair from coming forward, and then instead of whip finishing it, I'll put 3 double half hitches. So wind the thread around my tool twice, put that over the eye and pull the thread off the end of it, and 3 half hitches will be plenty of knot to hold that head in place. And I will just put my scissors against my thread and push to clip it out, and then I'll give it a haircut. And it's a pretty severe haircut. See if I can wet this marabou down a little bit. Not impale my thumb fingers again. Get it pulled out, down out of the way. And then I'm just cutting out all the butt ends. Try to leave the points, the tips. So very much a combination of a leech and a woolly bugger and a muddler. Right, the woolly bugger has well, I guess the leech and the woolly bugger both have the marabou. The woolly bugger has the marabou tail and the palmered feathered body. The leech is mostly just the marabou, depending, I guess, on the leech that it is. I want to find all those blunt-ended hair, deer hair in there. Those are the butt ends that I want to clip out, but I don't want to clip out any of the pointed ends because that's the collar. And it all just kind of blends together because of the color. The black Angus and I think that looks pretty good. So there are the feathers in the back, the marabou that is applied with the soft hackle wrapping, and then the spun deer hair head clipped like a muddler. I'm going to put a good drop of head cement. I do use a diluted goop, and that will just soak into that knot in the front of that head and make it a lot stronger.